Oh, I'm so sorry. I just bumped the crap out of you. Sorry, my bad. Okay. In her mid-40s, Annie Chapman was short and plump, with an Asian complexion, and she was dying of consumption. A violent argument with a fellow resident at Crossingham's lodging house in Dorset Street, where she had been living for the 4 months prior to her death, had left her badly bruised and suffering a considerable amount of pain. On the evening of September 7th, she arrived at the lodging house after several days' absence and told Timothy Donovan, its manager, that she had been in the infirmary. He allowed her to sit in the kitchen for a while, and a little after midnight sent his assistant John Evans to collect the money for her bed. Annie was a little the worse for drink and told him she did not have it. She pleaded with Donovan to let her stay a little longer, but observing that she could find money for beer but not for a bed, he ordered John Evans to escort her off the premises. There's like a little gnat in here, so I'm sorry if you can see that. At 5:30 a.m. on September 8th, Mrs. Elizabeth Long was walking along nearby Hanbury Street when she noticed a woman, whom she later identified as Annie Chapman, talking to a man outside number 29. She found nothing suspicious about their behavior and hurried by, noting only that the man, who had his back to her, appeared to be a foreigner. Hanbury Street was lined with 4-story houses, the rooms of which were to let individual tenants and their families. A total of 17 people lived at number 29, one of whom, John Davis, rose from his bed in the front attic room at 5:45 a.m. to get ready for work. Walking downstairs, he turned along the narrow passageway and stood on the back step. Looking down, he saw a sight that sent him racing back along the passage and out onto the street, where he breathlessly entreated the first 3 men he encountered to follow him into the house. They took one look at the dead woman, and then all 4 of them set off to find a policeman. The first police officer on the scene was Inspector Joseph Chandler, who was joined at 6:30 by Divisional Police Surgeon George Baxter Phillips, doctor. The surgeon later surmised that the killer had grabbed Annie Chapman by the chin, partially strangled her before cutting her throat and attempting to sever her head. Her abdomen had been entirely laid open, and the intestines had been lifted from the body and placed by her shoulder. The killer had also cut out and gone off with Annie Chapman's womb. Oh, I did not know that. Ugh. At the inquest, Dr. Phillips would propose that the removal of the womb suggested to him that the motive for her murder may have been for the killer to acquire this particular part of her anatomy. Furthermore, the speed with which the killer had removed it and skill displayed suggested to Phillips that the murderer possessed some anatomical knowledge. Once the body had been removed to the mortuary, the local residents discovered a surprising advantage to their sudden notoriety by charging sightseers to view the location of the murder from their windows that overlooked the site. But Annie's murder also sent a surge of terror-stricken panic through the neighborhood as the residents began to realize the nature of the monster loose in their midst. Mobs roamed the streets, determined to wreak vengeance on anyone they thought to be responsible or involved. Innocent Jews were barracked, attacked, and beaten. That's terrible. To taunting cries that no Englishman is capable of crimes such as these. In an attempt to contain this ugly bout of anti-Semitism, large numbers of police were drafted into the area from other parts of London. Their presence appeared to deter the killer, and for a brief period, the local populace enjoyed a respite from their autumn of terror. So this is Annie. This is the site where her body was found. I set up the camera this time, so I'm sorry if it's a little wonky. I singular characteristic was his ability to move noiselessly about, since the prostitutes never saw him or even knew of his presence until he was close by them. The Star's article had two consequences. Firstly, John Pfizer learned of the police's suspicions. It says learned. Like, with a DT, that's so confusing. Learned doesn't have a D in it. Of the police's suspicions and the prospect of his falling victim to the mob hysteria that was now surfacing in the neighborhood so alarmed him that he decided to lie low, and he in fact went into hiding among his relatives. The second effect was to cause a dramatic increase in the anti-Semitism in the neighborhood, as the articles fueled a growing belief among the genteel population that these crimes could not be responsibility of an Englishman. The police and the even more moderate factions of the press, some of whom even suspected that the Star had invented this monster, became concerned that the media sensationalism might encourage anti-Jewish riots and attempted to dampen the speculation. But the Star continued its campaign. The man is unquestionably mad, it told its readers on September 6th, and anybody who met him face to face would know it. His eyes are never still, but are always shifting uneasily, and he never looks anyone in the eye. That same article informed readers that the hunt for Leather Apron began in earnest last evening, and revealed that the police had begun a search through all the quarters where the crazy Jew was likely to be, but without result. It was against this background that the murder of Annie Chapman occurred on September 8th, and when it was revealed that a freshly washed leather apron, which it transpired was unrelated to the crime or murder, had been found close to her body, the anti-Semitic feeling boiled over, and the newspapers carried reports of riots against the Jews. As one newspaper put it, a touch would fire the whole district in the mood in which it was now. As a consequence, policing the area became a high priority, and uniformed officers were drafted in from across the metropolis in order to contain the racial unrest, as well as to instill a sense of order and security among the local populace. So this is Sergeant Tick. Well, a drawing of him anyway. I just noticed that the pages are like splattered with what appears to be blood. On September 10th, Sergeant Thick tracked down and arrested John Pfizer, but he was able to provide cast-iron alibis for the two most recent murders, and he was therefore ruled out as a suspect. He even appeared at Annie Chapman's inquest and was publicly cleared of any involvement in the crimes. Jack the Ripper as a social reformer. One of the more intriguing aspects of the Jack the Ripper case is the way in which social reformers latched onto the crimes as a mean of publicizing to the British public the need for change in the area. By generating a huge amount of press coverage, the Ripper murders, however abhorrent, helped lay bare the grinding poverty and awful social conditions that were the daily lot for thousands of men, women, and children who subsisted on the periphery of the city of London, the wealthiest square mile on earth. This picture is supposed to depict Jack the Ripper. The Lancet remarked that the modern society is more promptly awakened to a sense of duty by the knife of a murderer than the pens of many earnest writers. In the wake of Annie Chapman's death, the Daily Telegraph lectured its readers on how Dark Annie's dreadful end has compelled 100,000 Londoners to reflect on what it must be like to have no home at all, except the common kitchens of low lodging houses, to sit there, sick and weak and bruised and wretched, for the lack of 4 pence with which to pay for a night of doss, to be turned out after midnight to earn the requisite pence, anywhere and anyhow, and the course of earning it is to come across your murderer and to caress your assassin. Well, whatever can contribute to make human life one of luxury. There have existed tens of thousands of our fellow creatures, begotten and reared in an atmosphere of godless brutality, a species of human sewage, the very drainage of the vilest production of ordinary vice, such sewage ever on the increase, and its increase forever developing fresh depths of degradation. Just so long as the dwellings of this race continue their present condition, their whole surroundings a sort of warren of foul alleys, garnished with the flaring lamps of the gin shops, and offering all sorts of lodgers for all conceivable wicked purposes, every possible accommodation to further brutalize, we shall still have to go on, affecting astonishment in that such the state of things we have outbreaks from time to time of the horrors of the present day. Godolphin's letter inspired a Punch cartoon, which became instantly identifiable with both the crimes and the social conditions. Titled The Nemesis of Neglect, it depicted a shrouded, knife-wielding phantom drifting through the slums of the East End. The accompanying caption ended with the admonishment, "'Tis murderous crime, the nemesis of neglect." As the Ripper scare increased in momentum, there were calls for closing down of the common lodging houses and the wholesale redevelopment of the slums. Even Queen Victoria demanded that the dark, sinister courts and passages riddled in the area had to be lit at night. On September 24th, George Bernard Shaw wrote to the Star to theorize about the killer's motive. He said, "Sir, will you allow me to make a comment on the success of the Whitechapel murderer in calling attention for a moment to this social question? Private enterprise has succeeded where socialism failed. Whilst we conventional social democrats were wasting our time on education, agitation, and organization, some independent genius has taken the matter in hand, and by simply murdering and disemboweling 4 women, converted the proprietary press to an inept sort of communism." Obviously, Shaw was being ironic when he applauded the killer's success as a social reformer, but what cannot be denied is that the Whitechapel murders most certainly drew attention to the dreadful living conditions in the area, and several of the improvements, although bound to happen eventually, were sped up thanks to the increased attention that the killings had focused on the neighborhood. This picture, if you don't know or can't tell, is Queen Victoria, and this is George Bernard Shaw, who wrote the letter I just read you. Elizabeth Stride. She is pictured here in her mortuary photograph. I think it's so sad we don't have actual living photos of them. I wish that those had been included in these. I don't even know if there are some. We are a couple pages from the middle. So I do think this is going to end up being 3 or 4 parts, just depending. Alright. Elizabeth Gufsdotter was born in Torslanda, Sweden in 1843. She moved to London in 1866 and 3 years later married John Thomas Stride and changed her name to Elizabeth Stride. The couple separated around 1877, and Elizabeth, or Long Liz as she was nicknamed, began the familiar downward spiral into the drink-fueled, prostitution-funded lifestyle of all of Jack the Ripper's victims. By 1888, Elizabeth was staying off and on at a common lodging house at 32 Flower and Dean, where she spent the afternoon of 29 September cleaning 2 rooms. The deputy keeper, Elizabeth Tanner, paid her 6 pence for this, and by 6:30 p.m., Stride was enjoying a drink in the nearby Queen's Head pub. Having returned to the lodging house, she smartened herself up and cheerfully bade fellow residents goodbye. It rained that night, and at 11 p.m. she was was hugging and kissing her. Prophetically, the two men jested, "Watch out, that's the leather apron getting around you." Embarrassed, the two hurried off. Elizabeth Stride then made her way over to nearby Berners Street, where several witnesses claimed to have seen her over the next hour in the company of a man. This included P.C. William Smith, who arrived at 12:30 a.m. He saw a man and a woman, whom he later identified as Stride, standing in the gateway of Dutfield's yard, a dark and narrow court that led off of Berners Street. Around 12:45 a.m., Israel Schwartz was heading home along Berners Street when he saw a man attack a woman in the gateway to Dutfield's yard. Unwilling to get involved, Schwartz crossed over the road and noticed a man smoking a pipe in the doorway of a beer shop. At this point, the man attacking Elizabeth looked up and shouted "Lipsky" in the direction of him and the other man. According to Schwartz, the man in the doorway began to follow him, and, fearing for his own safety, Schwartz ran off. Since it is likely that Schwartz witnessed the early stages of Stride's murder, the presence of the second man suggested to some that the Ripper had an accomplice. However, it appears that the police managed to trace this mystery figure, and he was ruled out of being involved in the killings. This building is where her murder took place. You can't really see much. At 1 a.m., Louis Diemschultz, the steward of the Jewish Socialist Club that overlooked Dutfield's yard, arrived, back from a day spent hawking cheap jewelry at Westerhill Market, Crystal Palace. As he turned his pony and cart into the yard, the pony shied left and stood still. Looking into the darkness, Diemschutz saw a bundle on the ground and tried to lift it with his whip. Unable to do so, he jumped down, struck a match, and found a woman lying on the ground. Hurrying into the club, he fetched a candle and, with several members, returned to the yard. They saw that the woman's throat had been severed by what Diemschutz would later describe as a great gash, 2 inches wide. But it transpired that the rest of the body had not been mutilated, which led the police to surmise that the killer had been interrupted, possibly by Diemschutz. As he made his initial find, the murderer may well have still been in the yard, standing even alongside him in the darkness. The few minutes during which Diemschutz went to raise the alarm gave the murderer his opportunity to hurry from Berners Street and make his way into the city of London, where there, in another dark corner, he claimed his next victim. Catherine Eddos. Oh, that one went a little graphic, didn't it? I didn't expect them to show her whole body. Goodness. I'm going to read this part first because it gives you her history. Catherine Eddos was born in Wolverhampton. In her early 20s, she'd taken up with Army pensioner Thomas Conway, whom she claimed she married. They had 3 children, but separated in 1880 due to Catherine's habitual drinking. She then became involved with Irish porter John Kelly, and they stayed together until the time of her death. In September 1888, the couple went hop-picking in Kent, but failed to make a great deal of money. They returned to London and spent the night of 27 September at the Shoe Lane Casual Ward. Here, she reputedly told the police and Superintendent which towered imposing warehouse buildings. 3 uninhabited houses and a shop backed onto its southwest corner. 2 further houses, one of which was occupied by a city policeman, huddled between the warehouses. The square had 3 entrances, a fairly open, wide one that led from Mitre Square, the narrower St. James Passage, in its northeast corner, and the long, narrow church passage that led from the southeast corner out onto Duke Street. At 1:30 a.m., PC Watkins of the city police passed this southeast corner and found the square to be deserted and quiet. 5 minutes later, Harry Harris, Joseph Levy, and Joseph Lawinda left the Imperial Club on Duke and passed a man and a woman who were talking quietly at the junction of Duke Street and Church Passage. Although the woman had her back to him, Joseph Lawinda was certain it had been Catherine Eddos, albeit he made his identification from her clothing, which he was shown at the police station. Lawinda did see the man's face and described him as having the appearance of a sailor. He was aged about 30, about 5'9" or 175 centimeters tall, of medium build with a fair complexion and a small fair mustache. But since the couple were just chatting, he really paid them little attention and was later adamant that he would not recognize nor be able to identify the man should he see him again. At 1:44 a.m., PC Watkins returned to Mitre Square and found Catherine's body lying in a pool of blood in the dark southwest corner. She had suffered a frenzied and horrendous attack, her throat cut almost all the way to her spine. Her abdomen had been ripped open and savagely mutilated. V-shaped incisions that pointed upward toward her eyes had been carved into her cheeks. Her eyelids had been nicked through, as had her earlobes. The tip of her nose had been sliced off, and half of her uterus and left kidney had been taken away, along with a portion of the apron she was wearing. Watkins quickly raised the alarm, and policemen were soon converging on Mitre Square from all directions. Once again, the killer had simply melted away. George Morris, a retired police officer who was working as a night watchman in the warehouse opposite the murder spot, and who had been the first person alerted by PC Watkins after he'd found the body, later expressed his bafflement as to how the murder could have been committed so close to him without his hearing anything. According to the Illustrated Police News, Morris could hear the footsteps of the policeman as he passed on his beat every quarter of an hour, so it appeared impossible that a woman could have uttered any sound without his detecting it. It was only on the night that he remarked to some policemen that he wished the butcher would come round Mitre Square and he would give him a doing in, yet the butcher had come, and he was perfectly ignorant of it. Determined that the perpetrator would not evade them, the city police were soon fanning out into the surrounding streets, and then a little over an hour later, word arrived that the missing portion of the apron had been found in a nearby doorway. The city detectives hurried to investigate, only to find themselves at loggerheads with their colleagues in the Metropolitan Police. The writing on the wall. Around 2:55 a.m., PC Alfred Long found the missing portion of Catherine Eddos' apron in a doorway of Wentworth Model Dwellings on Coulston Street. It was stained with blood and feces. The blade of a knife had evidently been wiped on it. Long's first thought was that someone had been attacked and they could be lying injured or even dead inside these dwellings. So he stood up, intending to make a search of the block, and as he did, he noticed a scrawled message chalked on the wall directly above the apron, which read, "The Jews are the men that will not be blamed for nothing." Moments later, another officer arrived at the scene, and Long asked him to guard the building while he took a portion of the apron round to Commercial Street Police Station, where he then handed it to an inspector. Soon, officers of the Metropolitan Police were gathering around the doorway and staring nervously at their graffiti. Wentworth Model Dwellings not only stood in a largely Jewish locality, but were also inhabited by most exclusively Jews. The at the scene. They were adamant that the graffiti was an important clue in their hunt for the killer of Catherine Eddos, and they wanted it photographed. The Metropolitan Police pointed out that this would entail waiting until it was light, which by the time genteel purchasers would be arriving in the thousands to purchase from the Jewish stallholders at the Petticoat, Lane, and Golston Street. I imagine if they had taken a picture of it, I would have it. Sunday markets. Since there was no way of keeping it hidden from these crowds, the Metropolitan Police were convinced that the result could be a full-scale anti-Jewish riot. Daniel Halsey of the City Police suggested that only the top line, "the Jews are," should be erased. Superintendent Arnold of the Metropolitan Police argued that the context would still remain. The two forces were still bickering over what should be done when Sir Charles Warren arrived at the scene between 5 and 5:30 a.m. Agreeing with his officers that leaving the graffiti would lead to far greater crimes against innocent Jews, he ordered that the message be erased immediately, and before a photograph could be taken, it would prove a highly controversial order. And Major Smith, the acting city police commissioner, was barely able to disguise his contempt for Warren's actions in the days and weeks that followed, but Warren was convinced he'd done the right thing, and he defended his actions in a report to the Home Office. Alright, okay, let's see. 1, 2, I'm just seeing how much further we have to go. 3. Many. 7, 8, 9. Oh my gosh, there's so many. 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. Gosh. 15. Okay, so there's 15 pages left after this one, and I'm on page 30. I guess I could have looked the page numbers up. I'm the smartest cookie in the box. Brightest crayon. I'm the brightest crayon. Yep. Okay. So I'm going to read this one, and then I'm going to stop for the night. The Jack the Ripper letters. On September 29th, 1988, the Central News Agency was forwarded a letter to the Metropolitan Police that they had received on 27 September. It was written in red ink, and its tone was boastful and mocking. After taunting that the police won't fix me just yet, the writer went on to warn that he was down on whores, and I shan't quit ripping them until I do get buckled. Having told how he had saved some proper red stuff in a ginger beer bottle to write with over that last job, he complained it had gone off thick like glue and I can't use it. After threatening that the next job he did would clip the lady's ears off and send him to the police, the writer signed off with the chilling superquet, Jack the Ripper. I am not fancy enough for big words like that. Initially, the police dismissed this letter as a hoax, but within 24 hours of receiving it, the murders of Elizabeth Stride and Catherine Eddos occurred. The letter's warning that "you will soon hear of me with my funny little games" began to seem a little too prophetic, while the threat to clip the lady's ears off suggested premeditation in the light of the cuts on Catherine Eddos' earlobes. As it transpired, her killer had not attempted to remove her ears, but simply nicked the lobes in the frenzied slashing of his attack. But that knowledge would come with hindsight, and when a postcard was received in the early Monday Post of October 1st, referring to the previous letter and boasting of a double event this time, the police were duty-bound to investigate the correspondence and, if possible, trace the author or authors. Thus, both the card and the letter were reproduced on posters and displayed outside police stations, asking that anyone who recognized the handwriting should contact the police. By October 4th, what? I don't even know that word. Jeez, I suck. Copies of them were appearing in newspapers all over the world, making the correspondence public turned out to be a huge mistake. correspondence that the detectives on this case were almost overwhelmed as they struggled to investigate it. One such letter was received by Mr. George Lusk, the chairman of the Whitechapel Vigilance Committee, in the Evening Post on 16 October 1888. Addressed as "From Hell," the badly written, misspelled missive came with half a kidney, which the writer claimed he had taken from one woman. Lusk dismissed it as a hoax and put the stinking organ in a drawer while he pondered what to do with it. What? His friends, however, persuaded him to seek a medical opinion, and so the kidney was submitted to Dr. Openshaw at London Hospital, who concluded it was human and had been preserved in the spirits of wine. Some newspapers, however, misquoted Dr. Openshaw as having stated that the kidney was Jenny, and it had been taken from the body of a woman who had died within the previous 3 weeks. Openshaw was quick to issue a denial of the press embroideries, while Dr. Cedric Saunders, the city analyst, issued a statement pointing out that identifying the sex of a kidney was impossible, and that Jen leaves no renal traces. He concurred with the view expressed by the majority of police officers and doctors who examined the organ, that it was all probably a hoax perpetrated by a medical student. I don't think so. Today, it is almost universally agreed by historians that neither letter was sent by the person responsible for the murders, but the impact of the Dear Boss letter cannot be underestimated, for its arrival in the investigation helped turn a series of sordid East End murders into an international phenomenon and elevated the unknown miscreant responsible into the realm of enduring legend. Okay guys, so that's all for tonight. I want to thank you once again for joining me. I hope you are enjoying this casebook. Like I said, I found it at the thrift store, and I really thought you guys would enjoy it, so that's why I am reading it here on the channel. So please let me know by liking this video if you want me to continue this series and finish off the rest of the book. I have done about half of it now, I guess. Maybe a little bit more. Let's see. Yeah, we didn't. About half of it, because I started reading on page 6, it looks like. So, let me know so that I can read you some more or find something else for you. I also mentioned, I know I always do this at the end, but in my last video, if you watched it, I mentioned